I want you to picture two people. The first, we'll call her Beth, is a physically healthy woman who just lost her husband. She's depressed, she feels hopeless, and believes that her life's not worth living anymore. The other, Helen, is a quadriplegic who's in the middle of a particularly hard month. You see, Helen's body depends on medication to stay alive. These medications and treatments can take a toll, though. Side effects like headaches, fatigue, and nausea, frequent hospital visits, and the daily stress that you'd expect with a condition like this can be a lot to handle. She is also feeling suicidal. One day, Beth goes to her local doctor in Los Angeles and, during some routine screening questions, confides that she's suicidal and that she wants to end her life through California's End of Life Options Act. Beth's doctor immediately recognizes that she's in a suicidal crisis and, in accordance with California and federal law, initiates suicide prevention protocols, connecting her with mental health care and other support. Beth gets the help she needs to treat her depression and ultimately goes on to lead a fulfilling life. But when Helen visits that same doctor and says she feels like ending her life through California's End of Life Options Act, the reaction is very different. This time, the doctor doesn't call for suicide prevention. You see, if Helen gives up on her medical treatments, she might qualify for physician-assisted suicide. That's because she suffers from a condition that, untreated, will kill her in under 6 months. And so Helen's cry for help becomes the first step toward a premature death. Wait, that doesn't seem fair. How is it legal for physician-assisted suicide to be easier to get for one group of people than another? To get to the bottom of that question, we first need to acknowledge an uncomfortable reality. People with disabilities are often treated like second-class citizens in America. The US government defines disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. Having a record of such an impairment, or even being regarded as having such an impairment, also count as disabilities. This definition covers all sorts of conditions from ALS to muscular dystrophy, Down syndrome to anorexia. Our country's noble dream of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for all has been more difficult to achieve for people with disabilities. To combat this, Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, which stipulates that these individuals are entitled to the same treatment as the non-disabled.
We will not accept, we will not excuse, we will not tolerate discrimination in America.
The ADA also protects them from discrimination on the basis of their disabilities. The ADA was a huge success, paving the way for the world we see today with many services, activities, and protections for folks who used to face a bevy of barriers in daily living. But unfortunately, people with disabilities still face discrimination, and assisted suicide is one of the most striking examples.
Death with Dignity Act.
Death with Dignity law.
Doctor-assisted suicide.
Death with dignity.
Physician-assisted suicide.
Is it assisted suicide or is it dying with dignity?
When you legalize assisted suicide, you're not doing that in a vacuum for that particular person. When you are in a society that devalues some people, as ours does, those people are going to have undue pressure on them to opt for death in a society that sees their lives as less worth living or not worth living at all.
Over 80% of doctors surveyed in an NIH study believe people with disabilities have a lower quality of life than so-called healthy people. One of the things that I wanted to talk about with you was physician-assisted suicide. One thing a lot of people say in this debate is they'll talk about quality of life. And if someone has a low quality of life, maybe they ought to have this right. Do you think you have a low quality of life, or do you think you have a good quality of life?
Yes, I think I have a good quality of life. Even though I have a disability, I do not focus on what I cannot do, but on what I can do. If someone thinks that I have a low quality of life, then look what I can do now.
That phrase, quality of life, is a key one in the assisted suicide debate. Any reference to quality of life scares disability rights groups because things like the inability to clothe yourself, use the bathroom, walk freely, or eat independently are are seen by many Americans as components of a lower quality of life. But to many of America's 70 million people with disabilities, that's just part of daily life.
I'm Patty Kunze. I'm 64 years old. I became spinal cord injured when I was 48 from a car accident. We went out for pizza and I ended up in the ICU. My back was broken. It severed my spinal cord completely in half. I broke both bones in my arm, dislocated my knee, sprained my ankle. Not that that makes any difference now, but
That's lower on the injury list.
yes, exactly. So we can't walk. So I can't go to the bathroom like others. I mean, I'm totally paralyzed from my chest down, but it's still okay. Life is still worth living.
The problem with the law is that it sets up a public policy that impacts every single person in your state. It's all plugged into our currently broken, profit-driven healthcare system. That same system can't even provide basic care for many people. Some people don't have equal access to healthcare. Many people are going without basic care, never mind the kind of multidisciplinary, both end of life and therapeutic care that they could otherwise get if they had access to it. And you add on top of that the difficulty in getting coverage for care and then getting it even when you're covered. All of that can be extremely demoralizing and be an invisible pressure on people with disabilities to choose death over care.
Not to be cynical here, but wouldn't it be cheaper to have someone kill themselves than to care for them?
Oh, 100%.
Physician-assisted suicide advocates would jump in right now and say, we're blowing this out of proportion, or worse, we're making it up. Well, that's not what the National Council on Disabilities says. This is their congressional report on how physician-assisted suicide laws are inherently discriminatory. Or United Spinal Association, who's suing California and Colorado over their physician-assisted suicide laws. Or Not Dead Yet, a coalition of people with disabilities fighting state by state to save themselves from these laws. Or the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, who's also fought the government over this. In fact, not a single national disabilities rights organization supports the legalization of physician-assisted suicide. And if you still think we're making this up, talk to Stephanie Packer, who was denied life-saving coverage for her scleroderma diagnosis and offered physician-assisted suicide instead for a $1.20 copay. Or talk to someone on the pro side like Dr. Jennifer Gaudiani, the Colorado doctor who has proudly helped 3 of her patients end their lives solely because of their anorexia diagnosis. And actually, if you struggle with eating disorders, please don't talk to Jennifer Gaudiani. And in December of this past year, we broke the story of Eileen Meach, a 32-year-old woman with a diagnosed mental disorder who was found dead in a hotel room with an empty bottle of physician-assisted suicide pills by her body. An autopsy confirmed she had no terminal illness. Yet while she struggled to get mental health resources, she easily obtained this poison. Finally, talk to the family of Michael Hickson, a beloved father of 5 and quadriplegic who was denied life-saving treatment during COVID because of what his doctor called low quality of life.
Because as of right now, his quality of life, he doesn't have much of one.
What do you mean?
So
because he's paralyzed with a brain injury, he doesn't have quality of life.
Correct.
And that's just the little that we know about. The vast majority of these cases receive little to no reporting, with hundreds of mandatory documents unfiled by states each year. And even if someone with a disability can credibly point at abuse or coercion, no dice. Each state utilizes a good faith provision that essentially renders all participants in physician-assisted suicide immune from prosecution. And once you leave the United States, it gets worse. The stories coming out of Canada and the Netherlands are the stuff of science fiction. Big death is big business in those countries and a real cost saver for the government.
If you take a look at the way the laws are written, they say there are safeguards. Every single one of them is circumventable.
If this is all sounding a little procedural, it's because it is. There are safeguards in place that determine a person's eligibility to receive MAID, and they have to meet certain criteria.
So you don't see these safeguards as working?
No, they don't work at all. As they say, this is really supposed to be for imminently dying people who are suffering a terrible death. Yes, that person would qualify, but so do people who have, say, spinal cord injury, and they either cannot get access to or decide to opt out of things like nutrition support, breathing support, etc. It includes people who have mental health disabilities like anorexia that have high rates of lethality associated with them. You have other kinds of supposed safeguards, things like there have to be 2 doctors that sign off on this prognosis. Neither of them have to be a specialist in the underlying condition from which they say you're going to die. Another safeguard is that the patient is supposed to self-administer. There's no third-party witnesses required.
And it looks like these safeguards are irrelevant anyway once you factor in doctor shopping.
Somebody were not actually to qualify. They just go around until they find somebody who will qualify them for the drugs. With that doctor shopping, it just blows all of the hypothetical safeguards out of the water.
And those guardrails that Matt was busy tearing down, in many states, they're never enforced to begin with. Last year, Oregon performed psychological referrals in less than 1% of all cases. That's not a guardrail, that's an exit ramp. Here's the deal. Supporters of physician-assisted suicide, understandably, will always frame this as a relief of suffering. They'll say, think of the person dying a wretched, miserable death. Why can't they end their suffering? But isn't this yet another chapter in the fight for disability rights in America? Look at the data on why people choose physician-assisted suicide. It's not about pain, it's about autonomy. Look at Oregon's data, look at Washington's data, look at Canada's data. It's not pain, it's autonomy, autonomy, autonomy. That's what all this boils down to. Fear of disability.
Autonomy presupposes a range of choices and being empowered to make them. When you neither have the range of choices nor are you empowered to make them, and the only people who qualify for lethal drugs are people with disabilities, this looks a lot less like choice and autonomy and a lot more like eugenics.
The organizations trying to legalize physician-assisted suicide have a game plan. They propose a limited scenario with all sorts of safeguards. They get the legislation passed, and then they spend the subsequent years removing those safeguards. Safeguards become obstacles and barriers to access. Protections for the disabled always become burdens for the able-bodied. So instead of categorically rejecting suicide for Beth while weighing it as a possibility for Helen, we can do better. Those 2 court cases in California and Colorado that I mentioned earlier aim to banish physician-assisted suicide from the United States for good on the grounds that it's inherently discriminatory. There's still hope that Helen can have an honest-to-goodness go at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, just like the ADA intended, just like our founders intended. But until then, it's on us to stand up for the vulnerable.